name is Chinyere Tutashinda. Thank you all, thanks Ways Forward for having us and having me today. And thank you to the panelists. I'm excited to kind of dive in. But before we do that, we actually want to take a moment. We want to take a moment of silence. We're about to embark on a conversation that really commemorates what the last 10 years has looked like, both here locally and nationally, since the murder of Mike Brown Jr. and the organizing and movement building that has happened. But we wanted to invite you all in to close your eyes, to center, and to remember and honor the life of Mike Brown Jr. Thank you. So we're going to start with a video that was provided to me and for us from Chosen for Change and from Mike Brown Sr. and Cal Brown. So we're going to start with the video.
Killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson, Missouri.
At least six shots.
Every medical examiner I have ever direct or cross-examined, they could tell which was the entry and which was the exit wound.
Nothing can compare to the horrific day my son was murdered. It really takes a toll on your mental. I've realized that one of the best ways that I can cope with this loss is by making a difference through giving.
Thanks to Chosen for Change, I've come a long way. Chosen for Change means a lot to me. If it had not been for them, I don't know where I would be at today.
The Michael Brown Sr. Chosen for Change organization provides care and support to fathers and families who are processing the unthinkable. Our vision is to transform lives and transform hurting communities.
Chosen for Change organization has brought my life full circle, and I'm so grateful for them.
Our programs is out to help and support these families that's going through the unthinkable.
Your contribution gives us the ability to expand our programs and services in the St. Louis area.
Some of our programs are Chosen Fathers,
Mothers of an Angel,
COPES, Children Overcoming Painful Experiences,
SWAT,
First 48,
and Level Up for Literacy.
Please donate, please check out our websites. Come and share, come and volunteer. See what we do.
Probably one of the greatest things now in my life, losing a loved one, and then I done created a bondage with other brothers and sisters who have lost a loved one, and it's a healing process in which we go through this Chosen Father organization. So it's one of the most beautiful things I ever can imagine.
To see the work that we do, visit chosenforchange.org. Together, we are chosen for change.
So we're going to start, I'm going to start just introducing our panelists, and then we're going to start with our first set of questions. So to my right, there we go, we have Kayla Reed, who's the founder and director at Action St. Louis. We have Annissa McCaskill, who is the executive director of Ferguson, Forward Through Ferguson. And then we have Cal Brown and Mike Brown Sr., who are the founders of Chosen for Change and also the parents of Mike Brown Jr. So I want to start with you all. Right? Very often people are here in Ferguson or in St. Louis, and people will talk about Mike Brown Jr. and talk about the protests, but don't often talk about or understand the impact of what it means to lose a child, what it means to lose someone in your family. But I would love to hear, and if you could share with us just a little bit about what was life like before those devastating events that happened on August 9th?
We were the parents of 9 children. The last few years prior to Mike was rough for us. January 12th of 2013, I was diagnosed with chronic heart failure, and the ability to work was taken from me. June 9th, 2014, we lost our house in a fire. July 16th, we got married. August 1st, 2014, Michael Brown Jr. graduated from high school. And August 9th, 2014, our lives turned upside down.
Yeah, it definitely was a struggle for us, especially after losing our home, that same year. But we still decided to get married, so they kind of brought some joy, and then, Mike lost his life. So speaking actually before the hashtag, our life it wasn't the best, but we were all right. Everyone wants something different, but we didn't have no room to complain. We was happy, I can remember a picture that Mike had took, it's in the exhibit, with the hood on his head. He was very upset about what happened to Trayvon Martin. And that picture represents the hoodie, the Skittles, the stuff like that, So just to know that a year or two later that, that was how our life would end, or be seen as, that just really crushed us. So, here we are.
And I know that over the past 10 years, you all have thrown yourself into the work, is how you named it to me. And you have worked tirelessly to really support families, both in this community and throughout the country. How has that transformed you?
It definitely made me grow up. It made me appreciate, I have other children, so, it made me appreciate more of their lives and everything that they have going through, Mike said, the world was going to know his name. He was going to come back and shake the world, He definitely put us in a place where we didn't have no other choice but to keep it going, My mother told me at the age of 7 I was going to be a preacher or a teacher, and I didn't even understand what the hell she was talking about. She still, and she said, "Look at you now, you walking in your purpose." I never knew my purpose, So to be the voice for my son and other families that are lost, it's just a big thing, I really appreciate my role in this life that I'm living, to be able to just show my love and my support to my family and how much I care for my son.
I wouldn't necessarily say it changed me. It forced me to evolve into who I already was. It took me to lose might to relinquish the power that I always had. I've always been a go-getter, a hustler, a creator, and I doubted myself for a long time and was often misunderstood. I often got told, you do too much. You live in a world that has not yet been created. And so it really made me take a step back and try to do what other people wanted me to do and kind of do what people deem as the normal. And when this happened, it just made me be who I was already determined to be and show people what I had to offer. It's really a hard way to have to walk in your purpose, but we don't get to choose it. It chooses us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to ask Annissa, so after Mike Brown Jr. was murdered and his community, this community, the community down the street in Ferguson stood up, protested for months on end. The nation took notice. The Ferguson Commission was formed, and through that, there was 189 different recommendations, right? And I know that Forward Through Ferguson it was birthed out of that. Can you talk a little bit about, one, what are those recommendations, and what does that saying 10 years later, both for this community, but also for the country?
189 calls to action. I think we want to be clear. So this past Monday was the 10th anniversary of Governor Jay Nixon naming who those 16 commissioners were. And those commissioners were shepherds of a process where community had the discussion. You can liken it to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that South Africa had, where truths were said and things were unfolded that had never been discussed in the Midwest, never been discussed in this nation at the level that they were discussed. And the community laid bare the issues. And they were in 4 categories: youth at the center, justice for all, an opportunity to thrive, and racial equity. And what we know is, just because of the way this country was founded and the foundations of our systems, is that with those first 3, racial equity is a thread that runs through all 3. And unless things are built equitably, we will not make progress. So 2 things that probably jump out, because we have 189 calls to action. 2 things that came from that I want to highlight is the commission called for the creation of a 25-year endowed fund. We call it the Racial Healing and Justice Fund. And there are even organizations that were just honored that have benefited from the fund. We just completed the pilot for it. So over a period of 3 cycles, over 70 organizations who typically are ignored by the philanthropic community received resources, whether it was for general operating funds, whether it's for the establishment of their 501c3, whether it's for the work it takes just to maintain a 501c3, because what we know is that when Michael died, community activated. And in that activation, I believe Melanie said 20,000 nonprofits have been formed just since Michael died. Imagine what would happen if the resource was actually given to those organizations that are doing the work of the 189 calls to action. If those organizations had been receiving funding, if people had been activated in the way that they were activated after Michael died, I say that Michael would never die. If community was doing the work of making sure that policing was fair, that young people could walk down the street, that education was given to all children in a way that wasn't precipitated by whether or not their parents lived in certain zip codes, Michael would still be alive. The other response to the calls to action that I want to highlight is the creation of college saving funds for our children automatically. So I have the benefit of having a 20-year-old son. When he was 2 years old, I created his college savings plan. He's in college now. I dip into that fund and I pay tuition. My son will graduate from college debt-free because I was able to dip into that fund and pay his tuition. What would happen if that was an automatic and that resources were automatically given to families so that when their children went to college, they wouldn't have to live with crushing debt? We're not going to talk about the fact that college is already too expensive as it is, and it shouldn't be just a matter of parents saving. But what would happen if the resources and sales tax actually were diverted into a fund where parents could just tap into it like I'm able to tap into? So the city of St. Louis actually created that fund. And for a period of time, the city worked with St. Louis Public Schools, and children could be automatically enrolled. All they had to do is check a box, and the St. Louis Public School District would send the information over to the city. But then, as often happens when there are systems in place where people don't understand or they're unhappy with the progress of that particular fund, now the city of St. Louis public school system no longer automatically sends that information. Children are not automatically enrolled. And now there's a question as far as what will happen with the fund. But those are two things that are concrete that I know have happened in the 10 years. But in the end, they're an answer to systems that need to be changed, not just programmed to death.
Thank you. And as you talk about the various systems that need to be changed, like we know that people, not in St. Louis, and Black people in particular, have been organizing and fighting for a very long time for freedom, right? From since the first Black people were enslaved here, from Dred Scott and Harriet Scott in this city, to the continuation and additional spark when Mike Brown Jr. was killed, right? That people have continued to fight. And then but we also know that that moment changed many lives, right? Because people starting to see the system for what it was in new ways because of the way that police treated his community, because of the way they desecrated and treated his body, because of the way they treated his family. People's eyes opened to what the system was in this city and across the globe, right? And I know, Kayla, you were one of those organizers or people who became an organizer, people who responded, who saw, who fought. And over the past 10 years, not only have you started organizing, but you've built organization both locally and nationally. And would love to hear, like, what has the last 10 years taught you around how to organize in ways that really benefits the families, community, and can benefit nationally?
Yeah, good afternoon, y'all. Just want to say Mike Brown forever, period. And you are in this city. You are only in this city because it is 2024, and that represents something to national people to have a conversation about time brackets. A decade means something. We want to check in after a decade. And I'm very honored to be on this stage with people who, for this decade, have lived an example of what it means to be in service of the work, especially Mike and Cal. So, if we could just applaud them. Because I know what I have spent the last 10 years doing, and it was not my child. And so to imagine what you emote through to give us what you give us on a daily basis owes a standing ovation, in my opinion. And all the resources Chosen for Change will ever need to do the work that it wants to do until you say it's done. So I just want to say on August 9th, I lived in Delwood at the Woodland Apartments, if you're from St. Louis, off Chambers. My parents still live in Moline Acres, which I graduated from Riverview Gardens, and I know there's some people in here. Okay, that wasn't loud enough, but I appreciate it. And that school district encompassed Canfield Green Apartments. So I grew up with friends who lived in Canfield Green Apartments. The quick trip that propelled this to become a national story, I used to pay my rent there. I used to go get the money order to pay my rent there, to take it to the Woodlands on the first of, well, about a fifth of the month before 5 o'clock. Keep it real with you. And so I was a pharmacy technician. And I worked in Maryland Heights, and I lived in Delwood, and I had expired tags on my car, and I knew the terror that the police created on black people's lives every single day. That people would sigh when a cop got behind them, that you couldn't make it from the airport to the Arch without seeing dozens of police officers. That was a norm in St. Louis. That is no longer a norm in St. Louis because of the organizing that's happened over the last 10 years. The day that Mike Brown was taken, we had 3 county jails. We had the St. Louis County Jail and 2 jails in the city, the Medium Security Institute and the City Justice Center, and a fleet of municipal jails. 10 years later, one of those jails is closed. And we have created, what I have been a part of, right, is the work that I feel is the mandate of a chant that guided me from the moment that I went to Canfield Green Apartments on August 9th as the sun was setting, and became a war cry to people in St. Louis that Mike Brown means we got to fight back. And we have spent the last decade with resources and with none, with less than we should have had, inside of a national movement for racial justice, a place that sparked it, has been consistently pushing to alleviate suffering for black people, to build political power for black people, to mitigate harm, and to set a vision toward transformation where our children can thrive in this city. And 10 years ago, I didn't know I was going to do that work. I put pills in a bottle with a label on it, and I sent it out. I didn't go through some training to become it. I was a part of following this man's marches up and down West Florissant. I listened to other people. I met people like Chin, and I decided to give, I'm a PK, so I'm going to get churchy a few times. But there's a moment when you are sitting in a pew in a church and they open up the doors and you join. August 9th opened up the door and many of us came through. And for me, it is a deep commitment that I will spend the rest of my life honoring what happened in St. Louis, which wasn't just protest. That flattens it. They unleashed a war on everyday people in this city. What everyday people did in this city was a rebellion for our freedom and for justice for Mike Brown. And people have died behind it. People are in cages behind it. People are in positions of power behind it. And all of that happened because Mike Brown was taken and people said never again. And I just have to honor that while a few of us are in this room, there were thousands of people who made that possible, who went back to work, who continue to raise their families, who continue to deal with the systems of oppression in the city, but they made that possible. They made me possible. And so whatever I am, I just want to honor St. Louis for that. The last 10 years, plus and deltas, right? Good, bad, ugly. The good is some of what I mentioned. Organizations have been able to be built, political homes have been able to be built, power has been contested for. We live in a city that is currently represented congressionally by a black woman who was homeless, who was a nurse, who was a preacher, who is an abolitionist, who believes in a free Palestine. That Congresswoman represents St. Louis now, who took legislation from organizations like the Movement for Black Lives, introduced the People's Response Act, introduced resolutions for reparations. The heartbeat of the left is in the heart of this country right here in St. Louis. And so I want to say that we have been able to truly attempt to live out the principles of transformation by divesting from systems that harm us. There are less people in cages, there are less people being policed, and we still have a long way to go, y'all. We have a long way to go. 10 years is not a long time in the work of transformation, in the work of movement building. But I'm honored to be a part of it, and I believe St. Louis has something to say to the rest of the country as we use the word racial justice, because local organizing is where that lives in practice. It's where you build the muscle to contest. We can talk about who's going to be in the White House, but people will feel it in the streets of St. Louis. They will feel it on the ground in places like this. And the organizations that are on the front lines in this city, organizations like Action St. Louis, like Chosen for Change, like Forward Through Ferguson, like Freedom Community Center, those are the organizations that are trying to meet the needs of people who are suffering, and they deserve continued support as we continue to move in that direction.
In reference to the work, 10 years is nothing when you look at millennium. So over this period of time, especially in August, there is a lot of questions about, well, what progress have you made? I didn't create this. Nobody here created this. We responded to what was created. We're talking about systems in place and conditions that are not just multi-generational, but multi-century. They're embedded and woven throughout the threads and the foundations of this country, and we literally are attempting to deconstruct, or in some places, implode those systems and create new ones. And so when someone comes to us and says, what have you accomplished in 10 years? My question is, what are you doing? Because it's not just on us, we're responding. We are doing the work. What work are you doing other than giving speeches? What work are you doing other than showing up on August the 9th for a photo op? What work are you doing besides coming to conferences and feeling good and saying, oh, I had a good time, I learned so much? If we are saying that we want something different and that we want to not have to open a wound every August 9th or whatever date we commemorate the death of a Black or brown or disenfranchised person, then we have to talk about transforming systems. And not just transforming systems, but building new ones and accepting the fact that the shit we're doing does not work. So I'm a preacher's child, but unfortunately I'm a preacher's child that cusses. And I will hold it to a minimum. But I think I've probably been in the last year to a number of conferences. And it never fails that someone asks me, were you a protester? Kayla said it. Everybody was a protester when Michael Brown Jr. died. Everyone that had a conscience. For me, I had a 10-year-old son. He's now 20. And I had to be accountable to him as to why someone who looks like he could be his big cousin laid in the street for 4.5 hours. And then when I met Mike and Cal, I was struck by the fact that I got to go home to my son. So what charge do I have as a 53-year-old woman but to do liberation work? And what charge do you, as people who say that you care, but to support those who are doing it? We are under attack right now. And when I say we're under attack, it's not just a regular attack. We are at war. And the question is, it's not just who you voted for. It's not what bumper sticker you put on your car. What work are you doing to support us? And how are you going to have our back when we fight for our lives? Because we are literally fighting for our lives. So Kayla mentioned Freedom Community Center, Action St. Louis, Arch City Defenders, Forward Through Ferguson. We work in coalition to the point where we're tired of talking to each other. But we do that work. You don't want to see the Slack channel. I don't know how many notifications this week. There's some stuff going down tomorrow. I would say check our social media. I'm just saying.
If somebody died in our jail, so we gonna roll up on the mayor tomorrow, 10 o'clock, if you're free. Because even though we got her elected, you gotta hold people accountable. And so the work is not the panel, the work is the work. And it requires us to be deeply committed. But I know Chin's next question, because we prepped, so I'm gonna let Chin ask the question, and then I'm gonna answer.
Yeah. Sorry. We went off.
We're having a conversation, right? So, you mentioned, and I think this is what we all know, we're gearing up, right? We know that we are at war. And in that war, we know that there'll be many battlegrounds, right? There will be times when people flock to a city, right? They come in with good intentions and bad practices. And we know that there are many things that y'all can teach us and teach this audience of, like, how do we do better? How do we show up? How do we actually support? How do we show up for families in real ways? What do we do and what should we not do? And how do we show up to organizations, right? Instead of flooding in, overwhelming, taking up space, and actually decentering those who need to be centered. So I would actually love to start on this side. See, Cal or Mike Senior.
Well, you mentioned the families. The families who suffer these losses are often lost in the chaos. You also said what to do, what not to do. The first thing you should do is ask them what they need. With all of the help and the resources that were forwarded to us, nobody ever asked us what we needed. As we told you in the beginning, we lost our house in the fire. We were living in a hotel with 8 children. Nobody ever said, Mike and Cal, what do you need? But there were many people who wanted to show up and speak on our behalf and collect money on our behalf before even really knowing who we were. So I would say be respectful of the families, and if they don't have anything to say, then nothing should be said until they're ready. We have serviced more than 1,700 families globally. And we go in these different cities, and you have people talking for these families while they're in the worst space of their life. They don't know today from yesterday. And somebody goes and talk for them and get to telling people all the wrong things. Money start getting collected, and the family never sees it or even hears about it. So it's just very important to respect them, respect their space, respect their time, and show up only if you're intentional and you're passionate about it. Because once they lose their loved one, they're a ticking time bomb. So if they walk around here and people messing over them, what can you really expect from them after that? And most of all, don't tell nobody how to grieve. Because if you've lost your child, there is, whatever way you decide is the way to grieve. If you want to strike out running down the aisle, yelling and screaming and cussing everybody out, that's the way you express your grief. If you want to sit there and be quiet with your hands folded, that's the way that you express your grief. If you want to get on the stage and say F everybody, that's how you express your grief, and you have to respect that. And I had to learn that on the journey with my husband. There is so much that you should not say. Don't ask them how they doing, how you think they doing. They lost their child. Just show up for them, be respectful, provide the resources, and only connect them with people who are just intentional and passionate as you are.
I would say what people don't understand is after we lose our loved one, we be stuck in a trance. It becomes a life sentence. It plays on your mental. We try to learn tools as far as coping. Anything can trigger. You know, you can see someone walking down the street from behind, they look like your loved one. You know, you have people saying, you know, they're in a better place. you know, a better place to be right here with me. So you got people that just say a lot of word stuff, you know, that you have to just be, you know, over time, I guess I got a little better, I guess. I would say it was times, you know, I had friends, you know, that'd be like, you know, I'm about to go to my son's football game or baseball game. And I'm like, man, why is you telling me that? You know, but that was me drowning in my own pain, you know. He was just actually, or she was just actually just telling me, you know, that the child was in sports or was doing good in school or something like that. And I really didn't want to hear it at the time. And I find when I talk to other families, they feel the same way. And I, you know, over time that you understand that, you know, that's wrong thinking. But when you're hurting, you don't care who else hurting, you know. So I'm just glad that I was able to get myself together. I'm glad I had a praying wife, praying mother, you know, family that loved me. I stayed away from a lot of negativity because you don't want that negativity around you when you sparked up with fire already. You need all positive and all good energy around you at all times. You know, people trying to speak life back into you, because at the point of when you feel like the system failed you, as a man, you feel like you're nothing either. It's almost like they took everything from you. So I had to build up confidence. I had to build up. I tell people, you know, I'm 10 years old right now. You know, after you lose your child, you just go by the years. You know, I tell them I'm 10 years old. I had to learn how to talk, speak, walk, eat, treat myself, and love the people that was around me, because I didn't even care about nothing. You know, so even I had a place where I didn't even, you know, I didn't trust in God or none of that. I had to deal with a whole lot. I really had to get myself together. And like I said, when I talk to these grieving families, they feel the same way, so I didn't feel alone. But with a lot of these programs, I would say with my chosen fathers, I give them a platform. A lot of them didn't have a platform to even express themselves, or even people even knowing what their case was about, you know. So with our organization, it give them a chance to be able to, you know, cry, bond with other fathers, try to stop this ticking time bomb, because like one of you guys was saying earlier about, you know, these men, you know, men don't get a chance to just grieve and cry and be vulnerable, because we always were taught we got to be tough, strong, and don't show no emotion, you know. But what people don't understand, you got too many of those people running around in this world, it's going to be corrupted, because people don't know, you know, we haven't had a chance to just grieve, you know. So I'll say be patient with these families. A lot of these families do not know where they're at, what's going on. They are clueless of what's going on in their life when they lose. Definitely, if you have the tools, please, you know, with lawyers, you know, they need lawyers, they need therapists, they need people right there on the stand, you know, with them, you know, to try to get them in a position where they're able to have some type of, you know, words, you know, to even say, because a lot of them go mute. I went mute, you know. So just to understand, you know, that it's okay, and you got people that love you and trying to help you through this journey, you know. That's what we all need. Thank you.
Don't pull up and tell the local people how they should feel about what's going on. Don't treat collective trauma as if it's an academic discourse that you want to dive in and study. We're human. So I can't tell you how many people want to study Ferguson, the Ferguson Commission, the death of Mike Jr., and have never even actually come to St. Louis, but they want to talk about it and study it as though you can talk about it better than those who are on the scene. And then don't tell us what our response should be and what the timeline should be for us to heal. Don't treat our collective traumas as an act of tourism and a check mark of, oh, I visited this location. Pay the respect when you come, and understand that when there is a commemoration that is literally someone rubbing a wound or even opening a scar up, for the good of all. But then there are also times where it's not necessary for you to think that those wounds and those scars should be opened. Let them determine when they want to share. Let us determine what we want to share. And if you pull up with resources. Don't just pull up so you can be in the picture. Pull up and give to the community that is welcoming you or is willing to share with you what is going on.
Exactly, yeah. Annissa delivering it. You know, we run organizations, we work at organizations, yes? Organizations love toolkits. There is no toolkit for an uprising. There is no toolkit or agenda, run of show for what happens when something like 2014, August 9th takes place. And it's dynamic, right? Because you have, within a span of hours, you have the shooting, you have the news and the narrative that's taking off, elected officials are in the back room trying to spin it. And in this city, you had people convene, like a public mourning, on that street. And cops showed up with guns that could touch the ground and dogs, aerosol cans of mace. And it was a kettle, right? And it was I would say a decades-long fuse. Because people like, my parents had 2 talks with us. They had the birds and the bees talk, and they had the PD talk, the police department. You need to learn how to navigate these streets in St. Louis, or you're gonna end up in the cage, or you're gonna end up in the ground. And that's a conversation that you have at 15 when you just wanna learn to drive. You gotta have that conversation in St. Louis because of the level of institutional structure that empowered the police to do whatever they wanted to do, whenever they wanted to do it. And so there is no toolkit for this. And what you have is a moment as a national organization. I'm especially talking to the national organizations and the national consultants and the people who see a thing and they want to build a campaign around it. If your feet don't touch the ground, your hands should touch the keyboard. Because you cannot dictate a plan if you are not there. You cannot shepherd a strategy if you are remote. That's not how that works. And if we tell the truth, Ferguson triggered a conversation amongst philanthropy to say, we really ain't gave money to nothing about black people in years. So we're gonna do it. And they did it recklessly. They did it carelessly. You can send a new organization $100,000 to do a program, but they need the infrastructure to hold that resource and steward those resources and grow those resources and execute the program. And we just are still having conversations about stuff like multi-year general operating. We're still doing that. Meanwhile, the living, breathing work of a movement was happening here. And I don't think movements are just sustained by organizations. They're sustained by people and families and relationships that take a long time to build and develop, right? Things that have to get clarified, things that have to be corrected, hard conversations that have to happen, right? And like, these are people who live in a place. And St. Louis is a place, you feel me? People from St. Louis are with it. And if you don't believe me, you should go watch the tapes from 2014. Because I don't know regular people who would see the tanks and the tear gas
just stand there
and be like, I'm back in here tomorrow. Melly, you back tomorrow? What time you coming? I'm gonna meet you. We go park by the park. That was a normal occurrence here. And so there was a deep rage that was triggered, and that has to heal, right? And so when we have these moments, it's important that the legacy of something like a Facing Race conference is that it planted seeds. It didn't just fly over. Don't just fly over places. Stay in relationship to a place. Stay in relationship to Chosen for Change. Because when it's 20 years and you want to come back, the question will be, what did you do? Right? Because these communities like St. Louis desire and need the infrastructure to contest. And national organizations sometimes look at cities like dots. You think you could do the same thing in 20 cities. You cannot. It takes infrastructure to make a change in a place like St. Louis. It takes dozens of organizations working together to touch a few people in a place like St. Louis. And the other thing I'll say is, shit is about to change. It's about to get bad, right?
Real bad.
Cops are going to get off doing whatever they want to do. Every police union in the United States of America endorsed Donald Trump. Every single one. You know why? Because he is a stamp on their ability to hurt our people. That's what he is. The stock of private prisons skyrocketed on November 5th. You know why? Because he signals our people will be caged. A bill passed today that will any organization like mine can be labeled a terrorist organization and be stripped felons of their 501c3. Is your work and your value tied to your role, or are you deeply committed to this moment and the people who will suffer? Because our roles may be gone. Facing race may disappear. Is your value in your salary and your title, or is your commitment to a vision of liberation and transformation for our people? Because that's what this moment requires. And I want to say that because I do elections. I live in a state that Trump won by 18 points, and we ended an abortion ban, and we raised minimum wage. My team was a part of that work, and that doesn't mean shit on January 20th when that man takes office. And it's not just him. It is a decidedly committed multi-state strategy to enact extraction of our resources and exploit our pain and send harm our way. That is what we are in for. And so if we are not committed to the people, to the families, if we don't learn the lessons of 2014, we're going to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again until there are no more resources and there is no trust whatsoever. And then our people are just suffering without any level of support or response. And we cannot afford to do that.
So what we learned in 2014 and what Mike and Cal and everyone that hit the streets taught us is that we can't count on anybody but ourselves. You cannot count on government. You can't count on organizations. You count on each other and being like-minded and in lockstep with one another, arm in arm. That House bill will make everybody in here a felon if you stay with the work. The question is, do you stay with the work if it's a difference between you losing that salary, if it means that you become a felon? What cost are you willing to pay for liberation and for your families? Because that's where you're at now. So I'm a 501c3, so I have a limitation. I can't talk about the actual politician, but I can talk about the policy. We are at a juncture now where unless you are supporting and working with organizations such as ours, and definitely supporting Chosen for Change, because what they won't tell you is that in many instances, they have come out of pocket to do the work that they're doing. You know, money was thrown at them when their child was killed. But not the city, not the movement. You know, they have come out of pocket. And now they're building the infrastructure that we're talking about to do their portion of the movement. But even still, because of this House bill that we see is working its way through, and we have people that should be aligned who deflected and made sure that it passed the House of Representatives, even their work might be deemed to be a terrorist act if someone so decides. So what cost are you willing to pay in order to ensure that liberation comes? Because we've been talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. And what did Fannie Lou Hamer said? She said she was sick and tired of being sick and tired. That was 60 some odd years ago, y'all. She made progress, and we've regressed to the point where they are literally saying that by even working toward equity, even working toward liberation, that we could go to jail. We could remove our 501c3s. That's what it boils down to. You remove the 501c3 so the people still do the work. The people still do the work, and then the people get arrested because they've been deemed to work for a terrorist organization. What sense does it make that just by being black and wanting to live, I'm deemed a terrorist? What sense does it make that by wanting to help impacted families who probably are black and brown, that someone can decide they're a terrorist as well? That's the juncture that we're now at. It's beyond programming. It's creating infrastructure, and quite honestly, the infrastructure has to be clearly delineated to understand who is your ally and who is an op. We saw with this election that a lot of people that were wearing pink hats and marching with us were not with us. We hear a lot of speeches from a lot of people who say that they care and they want to cry and they want to kumbaya, but when the rubber hits the road and they might receive a notice saying that, your organization needs to get in line, or if they even receive notice, you will be deemed, you'll lose your 501c3, or we've determined that you're a terrorist. Are those people really going to stay? Are you going to stay? So this space is where you make those connections, because we don't know what we're going to have to deal with the next 4 years, but what I do know is that we damn well better have the infrastructure to fight it. So take a look around and figure out who are the people that will sustain the work that you're trying to do and who can be trusted. And if they can't be trusted, you keep it moving and you don't worry about their tears. We've had enough tears. At what point do we get angry enough to do something? So, yes, I love my pink colors. I love sunshine. I love a good outfit. I get my nails done occasionally. But at the same time, I also know that I love my child enough to fight for him. I know that I love my brother and my sister and all my family enough to fight. I love myself enough to fight. And we're at the point right now, yet again, we are fighting for our lives. I said we're going to have a 1965 swing out again. And the question is, are y'all ready to swing? Melanie, I just want to say Melanie is so St. Louis. She ready to fight, y'all.
Yeah, so with that, I think that's a good provocation, right? Not just have they given us tools, tips, but also a call to action, right? That are we ready to build the relationships that need to be built, to honor families, to listen to those on the ground, and to make sure that we are not talking about things, writing things, researching and academia, and I can't say the word now, intellectualizing, thank you, I was like academizing, and intellectualizing what we don't know, but we are focusing on actually honoring those who are doing the work, listening to those who are doing the work, and making sure that we're ready for the long fight, right? 10 years ago, this community was set ablaze in honoring and in fighting for, and uprising for Mike Brown Jr. And one of the things that was named was that Ferguson is everywhere. Yes. Right? And many people here and not here responded to that. But it is our responsibility to remember that and to continue that fight, to continue to remember that, to honor what happened here, but to also grind in and be ready to fight where you're at, because the fight is coming for us. Right? So I want to thank you all, thank each of you, not just for being here today, but for really fighting when it was hard, for pushing through on the days when it is almost impossible, to showing up for families who needed you, and for teaching us how to do it. Thank you.
Welcome.